So in 1999, I was working as a contractor in the steel industry, which meant I would travel from city to city throughout the U.S. and Canada for months at a time and train people in using our product.
Ryan and I were dating at the time. We met at Lee University in Cleveland, Tennessee, and after graduating, I moved to Charleston, South Carolina, and he would visit with me between his travels.
Every mill I'd go into, I'd get the opportunity to get to know the guys that worked there. And at times it was painfully obvious within minutes that I was a Christian, mainly because I didn't cuss. In fact, I remember one guy who invited me to his house for dinner one night, and when I walked through the door, he called for his wife. He said, "Hey honey, come here a minute, go meet this guy Ryan. He's a Christian I was telling you about. He's the one that doesn't cuss. Have a conversation with him, it's gonna blow your mind."
At that time, I was actually looking for a church to attend. I moved to Charleston the year before to take a high school theater teaching job and really wanted to get plugged in somewhere.
Everyone had questions. Why don't you cuss? Why don't you drink? Why do you believe in the Bible? And through those conversations, I would get to share my faith. It didn't happen all the time, but sometimes the interest would be so strong that I'd get to walk one of these guys through the process of making a commitment to Christ.
I was at school one day, and one of my students said, "Miss Smith, you should come to my church. I think you'd really like it." It was a large non-denominational church in town called Seacoast, and so I tried it. And I did like it. And so when Ryan came to visit on one of his trips, he came with me and really liked it too.
Here was my dilemma. I would share my faith with these guys. They would accept the truth of Jesus into their lives. But then I knew I was going to be leaving soon to go to another mill. And so if I didn't get them connected to a church, I knew their chances of continuing in their newfound faith would drop drastically. So I'd pull out the phone book. I drove to different churches. I'd visit on Sundays. I was just looking for a church that a mill guy, a guy who wasn't even close to having it together, a guy who didn't even know where to start, could. A church that was relaxed enough that my new friends could grow in their faith at their own pace without feeling out of place. Unfortunately, that proved to be a very difficult task.
I think we both really liked the church because it was like nothing we'd ever experienced before. I mean, we both grew up in church and we had a deep appreciation for our heritage. It's just that sometimes what you experience at church doesn't always translate into your everyday life. But this did. It was relevant. From the music to the messages to the casual atmosphere, it just made sense. But it was still powerful, if that makes sense.
I think that's when my interest in starting a church first came about. Because I knew what Selena and I were experiencing at Seacoast. It's just I couldn't find anything close to that in these mill towns. And I remember my frustration just saying, God, there just needs to be a life-giving church in every community. And not just one, like several, enough that they're easy to find.
After we got married in 2001, Seacoast hosted a conference for an organization they had helped start the year before called ARC, the Association of Related Churches. And their whole purpose was to plant life-giving churches. And I remember that resonating with Ryan. Instantly, he felt God was leading us to be a part of that movement.
It was a slow process at first. I had this burden. I caught the vision, but years passed before anything really happened. And then in 2004, I was given the opportunity to start working full-time at Seacoast.
They asked him to be the middle school pastor. Yeah, he wasn't too sure about it at first, but he knew it was a door God was opening.
Middle schoolers, those were good years, learning years. Because if you can hold the attention of a 12-year-old, you can do anything in life, my friend.
Those really were important years for us because we got to go behind the scenes and learn, as staff members, what makes a life-giving church life-giving. And we also got to build relationships with some of the people who would eventually end up moving to Chattanooga with us to start the net.
Why Chattanooga? Well, Selena's family was from Atlanta, and we were going to start trying to have children soon, and she didn't want to be any further from her parents than we already were. So we drew a 5-hour radius around Atlanta, and we started visiting cities.
I think we took a trip to Macon, to Augusta. We visited Asheville and Chattanooga, which is where we ended up, mainly because it was home for us. Like I said earlier, we met at Lee. Our first date was in Chattanooga, and we still had a few friends living here.
Once we knew we were going to move to Chattanooga, we would make trips there to look for housing for us and housing for the church. And we were driving down I-24 at one point, and Selena said, "Hey, what about that theater over there?" It was the Rave at the time. "We could have church there," she said. So we pulled in, we talked to the manager, and 6 months later, we started holding services.
The theater was my idea, but the marketing idea was all Ryan.
Look, I knew we had to get people's attention. There were 1,000 churches in Chattanooga, literally 1,000 churches. So how do you tell people that you exist and that you're trying to reach a group of people that have yet to be reached? You put up a billboard, that's what you do. And you put on that billboard, ifyouhatechurch.com. And then you invite those people to take a survey to tell you why they don't like church. And then you invite those people to your church.
It worked. We were in the Times Free Press. Ryan was interviewed by a radio show, and 234 curious people showed up week one. And our little team of 20 people, some from Charleston and some from Chattanooga, helped us welcome them all in.
It's mind-blowing to think that 9 years prior, God had placed a burden in my heart to birth a church for people just like the ones I got to minister to in those mills. And here we were, living out that dream.
It was just neat to see people who weren't really connected anywhere begin to experience a relationship with Christ in a fresh way.
I don't even know how to describe it to you, but it was amazing. And it continues to be amazing every time a new person gets to experience it, even today. Because in the end, there's nothing like it. There's nothing like seeing the light click on for a person. There's nothing like seeing a person walk through the door, expecting church as usual, and then to walk out saying, "That was incredible, I can't wait to come back." There's so much fulfillment in that. In fact, that's exactly what I wanted for the mill friends that I had in every town that I had stayed all those years, a refreshing church experience, or what my wife would call the Monsters, Inc. factor.
Yes, that story is true. I did say that. We were driving around Charleston dreaming about the net, and I told Ryan the vision for our church reminded me of the movie Monsters, Inc.
Don't feel bad. I had to have her explain it to me too.
See, in the movie, Sully and Mike Wazowski work at Monsters, Inc. Incorporated, the energy company that supplies power to the entire city of Monstropolis by making children scream. But what they discover as the movie progresses is that laughter produces much more power than screams. So, I said, the net is kind of like that. We want to laugh people into heaven instead of scaring them out of hell.
Pure genius. For a while, I actually considered calling us Monsters, Inc. Community Church. Monsters, Inc., Net Church, it's all the same. It's a church for those who don't go. It's church for those who can't find satisfaction anywhere else. It's church for those who feel church should be relaxed, relevant, and refreshing.